To the 10 million daily chewers of khat, the plant is a habit not dissimilar to coffee. Some chew it to stay alert, some to relieve the aches of physical labour, but most chew simply to relax and socialise with friends. But if it's so innocuous, how come it's been banned in much of Europe, Oceania, and North America? Why are anti-khat protesters gathering in supplier nations, and how has it come to be responsible for the deaths of thousands in Yemen? Well, let's jump in, shall we? Khat has been chewed where it grows in the Horn of Africa and in the Arabian Peninsula for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and its origin story is pretty similar to that of herbal aphrodisiac horny goatweed. Legend tells it that a goat herder, possibly from Ethiopia, Kenya, or Yemen, was out with his herd and noticed them behaving strangely after eating khat. Unlike with horny goatweed, they didn't get frisky, but he was still intrigued enough to, try a little himself. After chewing it, he felt strong and alert, and that night he didn't tire, and he sat up until morning praying and meditating. There's also been claimed that khat has a history of religious and spiritual use. For example, ancient Egyptian imperial cults are said to have viewed the plant as sacred and capable of realizing the consumer's divinity. They'd take it ceremonially to produce mystical experiences, fall into a trance, or transcend into apotheosis, meaning being elevated to the status of a god. Another legend, this time from Ethiopia, claims that khat was discovered by Sufi imams in their quest for eternal life. While one or all of these stories could be true, we'll never know, as the first written record didn't appear until the 11th century in a pharmaceutical work by a Persian scientist and biologist. In it, he simply described khat as a commodity from Turkestan with a sour taste that relieves biliousness and acts as a refrigerant for the stomach and liver. The next reference appears in 1854 from a Malay author who described his shock at witnessing the residents of Al-Hudaydah in Yemen, quote, chewing leaves as goats chewed the khat. He goes on to say, when they spat, their saliva was green. Produces a mild high that makes users feel talkative, alert, and slightly euphoric. Some liken it to the high induced by amphetamines, only much less powerful. In 1856, English writer Charles Dickens described it as nothing more than drinking a cup of strong green tea. Other users have been slightly more impressed by the drug, though. In 1924, toxicologist Lewis Lewin described it like this. Khat produces joyous excitation and gaiety. Desire for sleep is banished. Energy is revived during the hot hours of the day, and the feeling of hunger on long marches is dispersed. More recently, a journalist who took khat for research purposes only, of course, wrote that after 10 hours of constant chewing, he felt certain that he could chat up any chick and win any argument. The general... What are you up to? The general consensus is that the drug produces feelings of joy, excitement, talkativeness, arousal, confidence, and mental alertness. But it does take a good few hours of chewing and chatting to reach that point. After thousands of years of getting high off of the leaves, we finally decided to figure out how those leaves work. So, in 1930, scientists conducted tests on dried samples and managed to isolate caffeine. This is a mild stimulant that works by inducing the production of noradrenaline and dopamine in the brain. The only problem was that it's very weak, with only 7 to 10% of the potency of amphetamines. This raised the issue of if caffeine was the only stimulating chemical found in khat, how were millions of people able to get high off it? It took another 40 years to solve that mystery. In 1970, scientists finally discovered another chemical in the leaves, the elusive cathinone. This made more sense, as it is 5 times more potent than caffeine and works by blocking both dopamine and serotonin reuptake, therefore increasing the concentrations of both in the brain. The reason it's been hard to find is that once picked, cathinone breaks down into norpseudoephedrine and norephedrine within a couple of days, and after 4 days, the plant loses all of its potency. The scientists couldn't find it because they were working with old, dried leaves rather than fresh young sprigs. This is why, once harvested, there is a race against time to get khat to buyers, and you'll often see packages of branches wrapped in banana leaves to keep them fresh and moist. It If the name cathinone rings a bell, that may be because of the infamous synthetic version, otherwise known as bath salts. These are highly addictive designer drugs that cause depression, anxiety, tremors, and extreme paranoia. In one case, they were responsible for a man slashing himself open to remove the imagined wires from his body. In another case, a mother abandoned her 2-year-old in the middle of a highway because she became convinced that he was demon-riddled, and a user in Georgia tried to eat his arresting officers as they attempted to restrain him. It took 14 hits from a taser before he was finally taken into custody. Fortunately, in its natural form, cathinone is much less horrifying. For one thing, no one has ever tried to eat anyone after chewing the leaves. But unfortunately, they're not entirely side effect free. Common effects include insomnia, constipation, loss of appetite, and low levels of concentration. A few hours after chewing, users may also experience anxiety, low mood, irritability, and restlessness. This often encourages chewers to go back for more, although it's not a particularly addictive drug. Long-term users will commonly develop halitosis, darkened and green-tinged teeth, and a heightened risk of mouth and oral cancers. Even more seriously, years of chewing can increase blood pressure and heart rate and has been linked to coronary syndrome and heart attacks. The leaves have also been shown to cause severe liver damage, similar to that of excessive alcohol consumption. Some studies have even linked cat chewing to mania, psychosis, hallucinations, aggression, delusion, and schizophreniform, the shorter term and less severe type of schizophrenia. But more research is still needed to confirm the connection. However, many argue that by far the worst effect of cat use is social. In countries where chewing is the cultural norm, men will stop working at noon, retire to cat lounges, and waste the rest of the day chewing and ignoring their wives and kids at home. They'll often spend a large portion of their income on the leaves, leaving a little left for their families, and many claim cat as the reason for conflict, domestic violence, and divorce. The issue was brought into sharp focus during the COVID lockdowns, which grounded flights and led to bans on hand-picked and therefore potentially contaminated leaves. In Somalia, cat kiosks were closed for social distancing, and the government banned international flights. This cut users off from their usual Kenyan supply, and illegal shipping routes forced the prices up from $20 to $120 per kilo. Some had to give up chewing cold turkey, like Mohammed Abdi, who said, "A man without cat is like a fish out of water. I have to have my fix, no matter what. But I can't afford the exorbitant prices, so I'm going quietly mad." Another user explained that his friends, quote, "have started using other substances like illegal drugs or homemade alcohol. Others have started to rob so they can buy cat." Even police officers and soldiers were caught stealing phones and cash to pay for their habit. Musa Bihi, president of Somaliland, commented, "I did not expect more than 30% of the population to be so addicted to cat that they would do anything they could to get their hands on it." However, not everyone was disappointed. One anti-cat campaigner, Abugar Awale, described the ban as a blessing from the skies. There is less domestic violence and less divorce, and wives are happy because their husbands are spending their money on their families, not the drug. Productivity is increasing because men can no longer spend 6-hour days wasting their time chewing cat. Perhaps the most extreme example of the wide-reaching effects of a cat-chewing culture can be seen in Yemen. In the country, between 70 and 80% of men chew daily, and 35% of women also have taken up the habit. This amounts to 14.6 million man-hours per day spent chewing cat. Now, clearly this isn't ideal for productivity, but there's also a larger problem. Cat is a cash crop that can generate 5 times the income per hectare compared to fruit. This means farmers have stopped growing food and have started growing the trees instead, and cat now makes up 40% of the Yemeni economy. The issue with this, besides the lack of food security, is that cat is a thirsty crop, requiring 500 litres of water per chewer per day, and 40% of Yemen's water spring is spent irrigating it. This is in a country where water availability per person is just 2% of the global average. The result is drought, famine, and thousands of deaths. Cat chewing has also spread to children, with youngsters copying their parents. A 2019 report even found that child soldiers had started chewing the leaves to stay alert on the battlefield. Tragically, though, the country can't just give up the drug. With such a large proportion of the economy dependent on it, a ban would mean extensive unemployment and even deeper poverty. And this all brings us to Khat regulation outside of the key growing regions. Over time, migration has taken the drug to countries like Denmark, Germany, the UK, and the United States. Initially, Khat, as a non-addictive and non-lethal natural high, was completely unregulated. But over time, more restrictions and bans have been brought in, making it illegal in much of Europe, Oceania, and North America. One of the most recent bans comes from the UK. In the early 2000s, Khat use by immigrant communities started attracting attention. Panic spread, and the public, including some Somali community organizations, started calling for a ban. So the Home Office commissioned some research into the extent of the problem. In 2005, the research concluded that Khat use was moderate in terms of quantity consumed, duration of sessions, and frequency of use. It was also deemed to be a social rather than an antisocial activity and therefore should remain legal. However, things took a turn in 2008 when a conservative politician, Saeed Awarsi, announced that a future conservative government would ban Khat, and in 2010, when that party came to power, they announced that they would tackle unacceptable cultural practices by classifying Khat. They followed through on their promise in 2014, putting suppliers out of business and turning traditional users into criminals. Unfortunately, not everyone got the memo about Khat's new status, which led to Ahmed Khan becoming the first ever person to be prosecuted for possessing Khat in Manchester in the UK. He had been attacked and forced to jump from a first-floor window by men who were attempting to steal his Khat. Bleeding from cuts on his face and body, he flagged down police officers and gave them his address. When they arrived, the robbers were gone, along with 8 boxes of Khat. However, they'd been kind enough to leave behind 4 boxes filled with 23 kilograms of the leaves, enough to have Khan arrested and sentenced to a 12-month community order. He tried to plead ignorance, claiming he had no idea that the plant was illegal, but, well, that plea fell on deaf ears. Many cite Khat's ban as a case of moral panic, where the fears of the public and politicians vastly exceed the real threat. People worried that, like in Yemen, 80% of the men in Britain would start wasting hours chewing Khat with their friends, spending all of the money on the drug and neglecting their families. The fact that the men of the UK already had this option available to them in the form of pubs and beer didn't seem to factor into anybody's reasoning. What was also not considered were the knock-on effects of a ban. Firstly, Khat suppliers and sellers lost their livelihoods. This included those in Kenya as well as in the UK. Secondly, as Khat houses were shut down, people moved to take the drugs in their own homes and sought out other, more dangerous substances. And finally, the clampdown on supply chains slows the transit of the leaves and weakens their potency. There are fears that this could prompt some suppliers to spray the Khat with a much more dangerous synthetic cathinone to ensure their buyers' satisfaction. Regulation in the US has also come with some unforeseen consequences. Due to the legalization of marijuana, many drug traffickers have lost their buyers, which has led them in search of a new controlled substance to supply. While many have been embracing dangerous synthetic drugs like fentanyl, Khat is proving to be a profitable market for others. After all, it's easy to grow, requires no more manufacturing than being wrapped in a banana leaf, and is cheap. This has led many to call for legalization, just as been done for marijuana. In New York City's 2006 Operation Somali Express resulted in the seizure of 25 tons of Khat worth $10 million and jail sentences of up to 10 years. And not everyone was impressed. One Ethiopian-born cab driver who'd previously been arrested for Khat offences commented, "In my mind, such arrests are wrong. They act like they know more about Khat than I know." And he has a point. There is an undertone of racism and denial of cultural traditions in all these regulations and arrests. And is Khat really worse than marijuana, cigarettes, or alcohol? On the other hand, many who've grown up around the drug claim the bans are right. For example, Stalin Muhammad, a Somali immigrant working on Khat at San Diego State University, says the plant's cost has been linked to family problems, including domestic violence. "I have seen what it does. Families who are trying to make ends meet on a daily basis cannot afford it. It just creates so many problems between a husband and a wife to the point where a broken family is going to be the result." So maybe if these non-growing countries, like the US, have an opportunity to nip epidemic Khat use in the bud, well, maybe they should take it.